Hey everyone and welcome back to a new video. Today I want to talk to you about the upcoming Black Templars Index Astartes supplement, which was somewhat subtly announced in a recent Warhammer community article talking about the 9th edition Codex landscape. Obviously we've just had the new Space Marine and Necron codexes, and we now also know that Blood Angel, Space Wolves, Deathwatch and Death Guard are on the way later this year, with 2 more codexes set to follow in January 2021. But nevertheless, the news that the Black Templars are finally getting their own standalone book has really grabbed the community's attention and built a lot of excitement for what could be coming with it. A big reason for that, I feel, is because what we were given in the recent Psychic Awakening Faith and Fury supplement wasn't all that substantial. Perhaps not too surprising given how many factions Games Workshop managed to pack into that one book. However, we won't have that problem in 9th edition because by stating clearly that they'll be getting an Index Astartes as opposed to simply a Codex supplement, we know that the Black Templars will be getting the same detailed treatment that the Space Wolves and Blood Angels are getting in the coming months. Now, I personally feel that a standalone book is precisely what the Black Templars deserve, not just because they used to have one back in 4th and 5th edition, but also because they're such an important chapter when it comes to 40k lore. They've had tens of books and graphic novels written about them over the decades, and many of them are what got me more and more immersed into the hobby. However, as the Warhammer community article points out, they're also quite distinct from many of the more Codex compliant chapters, numbering in the thousands and organising themselves around crusade fleets rather than traditional companies. These are just 2 of the many ways that the Black Templars diverge from their fellow chapters. You've also got a rather unique command structure, starting with marshals who lead the crusades, all the way down to the individual crusader squads which see trained battle brothers fighting alongside newer scout recruits. As you can see, there are many reasons why I personally feel it's unfair to pack Black Templars into the standard Space Marine Codex, and I want to spend this video talking about what I'm hoping to see from their new Codex. So with all that said, let's get stuck in. So, as with the other standalone Space Marine codexes, I think a big focus for any new Black Templar one will be showcasing the various Primaris units as the official face of the chapter. This isn't something we saw too much of with the Psychic Awakening supplement, largely because it was simply updating existing datasheets. Also, there wasn't really much of a need to do so, since they were still leaning heavily on the existing Space Marine Codex where all of that photography already exists. However, now that there'll be a standalone army, I think the look and feel of the chapter will more overtly shift towards the Primaris range, and whether you love the Primaris or hate them, that's something we have seen from every standalone chapter so far. However, I don't think that's necessarily something to put people off. There's some incredible artwork online showcasing Primaris Black Templar warriors, much of which seems to almost preempt the new Blade Guard veterans with their nuanced Crusader style. And that illustrates what I'm hoping to see first and foremost from this codex, a series of releases that offer a Black Templar spin on the existing Primaris range. In some respects, I think the Assault Intercessors themselves were partly prompted by the impending Blood Angel, Space Wolves and Black Templar releases. All 3 chapters heavily use close combat units, whether it's the Death Company, Blood Claws or Crusade squads. But what I'm suggesting goes far beyond simply offering upgrade sprues for those sets. They're certainly welcome though, and I'll come back to those in just a moment. Rather, this new range of combat-themed Primaris units sets the scene perfectly in my mind for a new Emperor's champion to join the front lines. Not only is the current model a little old now, but he understandably doesn't have quite the same stature as the Intercessor models that will likely make up the bulk of most Black Templar armies. Now, to some extent that doesn't really matter. The Emperor's champions are timeless heroes and able to smite the Imperium's enemies regardless of their own sides. However, in the lore we know that those champions are normally selected from amongst the Crusade's warriors on the eve of battle. So if the Black Templars are allowing bulkier, stronger Primaris Marines to join their ranks, then there's a good chance that their Emperor's champions will be Primaris too at some point. I also think the Emperor's Champion is just such an iconic role to show off through the lens of the Primaris. The new Primaris models that have been released during the Psychic Awakening campaign have been incredibly exciting to see and have consistently projected that sense of transcendence that sits at the heart of the lore. Each hero, whether it's Calgar, Lazarus or Mephiston, is becoming more than they were before, and I can't see why you deny that to a figure as legendary as the Emperor's Champion, especially given the fact that each of the new Primaris characters have also been a great way of illustrating the heart and soul of each chapter. But that particular upgrade could be considered a given, so what other models might we see? Well, I think the Sword Brethren are also a really important unit for the Templars, being their veterans after all, and I'd love to see them also take the step into the Primaris range. I do wonder though if that might end up happening through a specialised upgrade sprue similar to the Black Templars chapter upgrade, which can offer a bit more flavour and additional customisation options than your typical upgrade sprue. Ultimately though, whether it's through a standalone box or a series of upgrades, I really want to see this particular unit get a refresh. This is not only because new Primaris Marines will eventually be taking up the mantle of the Sword Brethren in the lore, and so we want to be able to reflect that in our armies, but also because of their rules. The Sword Brethren are the legendary veterans of the Black Templars. When a Marshal of a Crusade dies, it's one of them that competes for the role, and so we want them to be the finest warriors in our armies. Sadly, when we compare veteran intercessors with firstborn company veterans in the new Space Marine Codex, it's clear that staying as a firstborn doesn't quite deliver that. Unfortunately, without Primaris Sword Brethren, I fear the firstborn variants just won't feel viable compared to other Space Marine armies, diminishing the appeal of the whole Codex itself as a result. However, that actually makes me rather hopeful that Games Workshop will see the issue too, prompting them to give Sword Brethren the Primaris treatment and offer us a great centrepiece unit that combines a zealous appearance with a suitably ferocious stat line. But what about Helbrecht and Grimoldus, the other two pivotal Black Templars characters? Well, I talked about them getting Primaris upgrades in a previous video, but I'm now slightly hesitant to bet on them being upgraded in time for this upcoming codex. As I mentioned back then, I think there's certainly room to explore a Primaris chaplain character like Grimoldus, but I'm sceptical about how much time and resources Games Workshop has, given how many new models have been coming out across all of the games recently. To put it bluntly, if it was a toss-up between getting the Primaris version of one of these two characters or getting the Primaris Emperor's Champion and Sword Brethren, I'd rather choose the latter. Naturally, seeing either Helbrecht or Grimoldus taking on the Rubicon Primaris would be a wonderful thing to see, especially given that some of their greatest enemies, I'm thinking Ghazghkull in particular, have also beefed up recently. But for me, it's important that that doesn't come at the cost of other great units that will, arguably, get more mileage in our collections and games. However, let's turn away from the models and talk about rules. As I mentioned earlier, the Black Templars have a rather unique command structure, and part of that involves their new recruits fighting alongside their more experienced battle brothers in Crusader squads. Naturally, in this new Primaris era, there's a number of cool ways to continue that tradition, but I also think it's important that things aren't taken too far. In a sentence, I'd like to see the option of adding scouts to any Black Templars core unit, meaning they can be part of firstborn tactical squads, intercessor squads, or even, rather fittingly, concealed infiltrator and incursor squads. By taking this approach, it helps to bring that image of knights and their squires to the Black Templars, but in a way that's adaptable to whatever style of army we choose to collect and play with. I'm sure Games Workshop have thought about this far harder than me, but I think a bold move like that would also help to make units like scouts far more relevant and breathe a new sense of life into model ranges that have fallen by the wayside a little, at least from what I can see. But I'd also like to see more emphasis placed on chaplains in Black Templars armies. Now, chaplains have certainly not fallen out of our affection. We're getting a great new model for Warhammer Day on the 31st of October after all, but I think they have a special place in crusading armies that needs to be focused on. Looking at the FAQs we've got for 9th edition, Black Templars armies have access to a special set of litanies, which offer some really nice buffs, from giving charging units extra attacks to conveying a 5+ feel no pain save. And yet, chaplains are zealous spiritual guides for the Space Marine chapters, and in my eyes, that makes them rather important for an army whose beliefs alone have kept them on an eternal crusade for the last 10,000 years. With that in mind, what I'd love to see is a recognition of that special status on the battlefield. It might be through something as simple as expanding the spiritual leader's aura from 6 inches to 9 or 12 inches, or perhaps even improving the chance of a litany succeeding from 3+ to 2+. I could go further, but I feel even a slight boost like these gives that impression of Black Templars chaplains being of a special breed. Those of you who know Grimoldus' background will know exactly what I mean, but without making them overpowered, just something to make them stand out a bit. And flavour like that is probably no better embodied than the vows we saw in the 4th edition Codex. For those who may not be familiar, back in 40k's 4th edition, the Black Templars Codex offered a choice of 4 vows that your army could take before the battle: suffer not the unclean to live, uphold the honour of the Emperor, abhor the witch, destroy the witch, and accept any challenge no matter the odds. These were fantastic ways of gently tailoring how your army played in order to adapt to your opponent and mission, but fundamentally using a system that really reflected the tone and feel of the Black Templars lore. In fact, some of these have translated quite nicely into 9th edition already. Abhor the Witch is a new stratagem for the Black Templars, and I can sense the spirit of uphold the honour of the Emperor in abilities like the Litany of Divine Protection and the Black Templars chapter tactics. But the Veils was something else altogether, and it's a way of playing that I'd love to see return in some format, and it doesn't even need to use the Veils we've seen historically. For example, it could be that a Veil compels your core units to stand and hold objectives if at all possible, illustrating your army's attempts to protect important relics from the enemy's clutches. Naturally, that somewhat restricts your army's movements, but might also convey an extra layer of cover as a trade-off, and that is really useful if you're playing an objective-themed mission. I'll let you consider some others, but hopefully you can see where the Veil system still has a place and could offer a really unique way of playing with the Templars while utilising their lore to full effect. And very lastly, a quick comment on the lore. Obviously we've had the occasional stories and updates coming out of the Black Templars, but nothing as significant as we've seen with other chapters. While Calgar, Mephiston and Shrike have been doing their thing, Helbrecht and Grimoldus have been particularly quiet. We do know that Helbrecht has paused his hunt for Ghazghkull, and after being reminded by Guilliman of his greater duty to the Imperium, has been aiding every ecclesiarchal world he and the Black Templars could find. How has that been going, and what sorts of conflicts have they been getting into? Given the myriad of threats facing the Imperium, which one or several are the Templars going to be coming up against? And lest we forget, Armageddon, a world that has been the setting of so much conflict and history for the Black Templars, is currently getting set for the arrival of Angron, Demon Primarch of Khorne. Will Helbrecht or Grimoldus have anything to say about that? Whatever the answers, the Indomitus Crusade is the sort of war the Black Templars were made for, and despite the fact that we've all been longing for them to get more attention, I can't think of a more fitting arena to bring them back to. It's going to be great, and I can't wait to start collecting them again. But that's just a few of my thoughts of what I'd like to see in the upcoming Black Templars Codex, and to be frank, I really can't overstate how excited I am for it. I came into the hobby during 3rd edition 40k, and Black Templars were my first army, so I have a ton of nostalgia and affection for this chapter, and they really do deserve to have their own codex again. But what do you think? Are you excited for their codex, and what sort of units and rules would you like to see? Are you considering trying out the chapter for the first time, or are you anything like me, excitedly dusting off your old Black Templars army in anticipation of what's to come? Whatever the case, let me know in the comments below, and thank you as always for watching. If you liked the video, please do consider liking it and subscribing to the channel, and I do hope to see you in the next one. But until then, do take care.